I'm going to be going over how I use Lerna. It's a tool for handling monorepos, and you see a lot of people using it with monorepo setups with npm packages, or maybe they have multiple packages in a single GitHub repo, and then they use it to handle it and maybe publish them all at the same time. So what I'm going to be going over in this video is not so much that, but instead taking this from an angle of someone who has a project where you're not even wanting to publish it to npm maybe, and how can Lerna be helpful to you, even if you're just using a private project basically. So to start off, we're going to look at how to add Lerna to a monorepo, or specifically add Lerna to a Yarn workspace. And then we're going to be going over 3 commands that I regularly use that have really helped me out. So we're not going to go through the entire all Lerna can do. It has a lot of capabilities, but these are 3 commands that I use a lot and get most value out of. Now the other thing is, if you don't even know what a Yarn workspace is, I recommend watching a video I have where I go through that and I set up a little project with Yarn workspaces. And that's currently the code that I'm looking at right now, or I have up. And I'll link that in the description below if you want to get that. The other thing is, with that code, I just added some scripts here, and I add some scripts in my monorepo. So the layout of this right now is I have 2 packages. I have a common package and a server package. So right now I only have 2 packages, but Lerna just gets even more valuable if you have more and more packages. And it's very basic. I added a single script that says test, and here I'm just echoing out some text. And then we have an index files over here. So that's kind of the layout of it. And we have it set up in a Yarn workspace right now because we have workspaces here, and we have the package set to true. So first thing we're going to do to actually add Lerna to the project is to install it. So if we just try doing yarn add Lerna, and maybe we want to install it as a dev dependency in a Yarn workspace, it's going to get mad at us. We can get around this by installing it with the -w flag. This makes it so we install it in the root workspace, which is what we want to do. So after we do this, we're going to initialize Lerna. I'm going to say npx lerna init, and what that's going to do is it's going to create a lerna.json file. And this is kind of our config for Lerna. Now, one other thing that I like to add to this config that I usually add in projects is to use Yarn as the client and to use workspaces. So I'm going to copy both of these, because you can actually just use Lerna without Yarn and use it with npm if you want to, but I prefer using it with Yarn. All right, so the first thing I'm going to go over is Lerna run. So this is a command that you can run. Basically what it does is it runs that command in each package that you have. So if I say npm run, and we're just going to say test. So this is in my root directory. So this is going to run the Lerna run test. And we're going to see Lerna gets run, and we can see it's going to go into I have 2 packages, the common, which I called walnut common and walnut server, and we can see it runs the test script in both of it. So here we can see it just echoed this, and we can see the output of it right here. And we also do that here. So basically in my package.json for common, I have a script called test, and in the server I have a script called test. So when I do run like that, it runs in both of it. So that's the first thing that's really handy, is to be able to run scripts across packages. Now the other thing that I commonly use with this is you'll want to usually narrow just the packages down. Usually you don't want to run it across all of them. So there is the -- scope flag that I commonly use, and here you can just pass in which one you want to run. So for example, I may only want to run tests in the walnut common package. So I'll say walnut/common. And the name that I use here is the name that we have in the package.json file. So we have walnut common there. So that's why I'm using that. All right, so now if I run this, we'll notice it's going to run in a single package. And again, we could then pick multiple package by doing curly braces and doing a comma. So here I can run it on walnut common and walnut server. These are my only 2 packages, but if I had more packages, it would only run it on these 2 packages. So that's that flag I tend to use quite a bit, and that's pretty helpful. So this is the first Lerna command, is running different scripts. So I'll be usually testing. Maybe I want to build multiple packages at once. I'll do Lerna run build and that sort of thing. So the next thing that I want to go over is versioning your code. And so in our package.jsons, we actually have versions. So Walnut is 1.0 and our server is 1.0. And so we can actually use Lerna to increment this as we change our code and actually increase that version and keep track of what version everything is in. And you can do that by using the Lerna version command. And we'll see it's going to add a little bit more than just what I said. But before we do, I wanted to mention this flag that I use with it called conventional commits. So if you're not familiar with that, which haven't really used them a ton myself, I'm just kind of getting into them. It's a way of writing your commits. They look like this. And basically a computer can parse this and figure out what version it should be to increment your code. Basically, what I've been using also with this to kind of help me out is this thing called CommitZen. They also have a VS Code plugin that I've been using. And so what this looks like in practice to commit with this is, so I come over here, I say CommitZen and do this conventional commit. And I pick what I changed here. So in this case, I don't know, I just basically did some like general chore stuff. We didn't really mess with source files. We just did kind of script and package.json stuff. So I guess this would be considered a chore. And then I did the scope. I'm just going to say all because we kind of changed stuff in all the packages. And then here, practicing Lerna. And then here we can go ahead and there's some other things we can fill in. I usually just kind of ignore them. I just kind of failed. Oh, you know what? I don't even have a CommitZen set up in this, so it won't even let me. But that's kind of an idea how you would fill that out if you want to. But anyway, first thing you do is you commit your code. So Lerna stuff, commit my code. And then when I commit my code, I can now version it. So I can say yarn, or I guess we can do npm. I've been using that before. npm run new version. So what this is going to do is it's going to create a git tag, and then it's going to also create us some change logs, and then it's going to push this all up to GitHub. So, well, at least it's going to be GitHub for me because that's where I'm hosting my code, but it pushes up your code to your remote GitHub repository, or Git repository, I mean. So let's take a look at what it added. So we have a change log at the top here, and we can see some stuff. Nothing's too interesting right now because we haven't really done much. And we can see a change log here. We can see a change log here as well. But this change log will be more meaningful when we actually have like multiple releases and we can see what has changed release to release, which we'll see in a second. And then if we go to GitHub, here is where I'm storing this. And I can hop over to that branch over here. I guess looking at the branch doesn't do anything, but we can look at the release over here. So it created a release for us, 1.0.1 automatically for us. So here is where it's going to get nice, is when we change our code. I don't know, I'm going to come over to our index file over here. And let's say we call a common function twice for some reason. Commit our code, and again, we can just run this again to create a new version, and now it's going to create a new change log. And you'll notice now the difference between what happened this time versus last time is our code only incremented the version of the Walnut server. So if we look at the package.json here, it's version 1.02, whereas the common is just 1.1 or 1.0.1 right now. So it's going to only change the packages or version the packages that have changed. So that is pretty sweet. And I believe the changelog gets a little bit better. Nope, doesn't look. Okay, yeah, here we go. At least it gives us a URL. I don't know if we had a URL over here. Yeah, we didn't have a URL here. So now we do have a URL. So we can at least click on this now and we can get a URL and come over here and we can see the code changes that happen between commits. Well, not commits, I mean releases. So that has been pretty handy to like keep everything versioned like this. And so being able to know exactly what packages are at what version and being able to see changes in releases. So now what I'll do is I'll pair this with continuous integration and I'll create versions for that, which I'm going to be showing in a future video. This is just kind of an introduction to the commands. So that's that. The other thing I wanted to mention is I can't really get this working when I used it, but I wanted to mention it because it seems really powerful. So if I come over here to common, and let's say I console log this twice, basically I just made a change in the common package, right? So we're going to go ahead and commit this console.log. And so I've now made a change to this. I can now say in my package.json, I can use Lerna run test, and we're going to use the dash since flag. So when I do new version test and we run it with that, okay, it didn't do what I thought it was going to do. So what since is supposed to do is it's supposed to just run it on the packages that have changed since the last release, which in this case should just be common. But again, it didn't work here. It didn't always work for me. And maybe it just has to be dirty changes or changes that have been not committed. Like we haven't committed this change. Let me see if that works. No, it doesn't even do it either. Anyway, yeah, I couldn't really get dash sense to work, but that seems really sweet to be able to do that. But you can kind of get the same thing to work with this command called lerna diff. So if I say npm run diff, we can see what has changed since the last commit. And by the way, this checks commits. And sorry, I said commit right there, I meant release. So every time we make a version of this, we're kind of like snapshotting it. So I just got rid of the change that I made in common, but we can see the release of it. So npm run diff, same thing. So since the last time I've released this code, we have added this line. So it doesn't matter if I do commits in between. So another one, give that a save. You'll notice we now have 2 commits. And so what I can do is I can see the package associated with this. So common is this one, server is this one, and we can see that this package has changed. So that is pretty handy, and so that is actually what I've used to create a tool to see which packages have changed. Is I just run lerna diff, and I can see what changed since the last release. So what this will allow me to do is commit multiple chunks of code, and then whenever I want to push this to production, I'll just release a new version of it, and then I can use lerna diff to see what has changed, and then use lerna run to run different commands based on that. So for example, if only the common package changed, then I only want to test on the common package. And so I can use diff to know what has changed. Anyway, that's kind of just an introduction into some different commands that I use. These are the commands that I pretty much have really only been using with Lerna right now. If you guys know how to get this dash since to work, I would love to know. I haven't had much luck with it, but I don't know if I'm using it wrong somehow or if I have a misconception of how it's supposed to work, because I've been kind of just doing it with diff. But anyway, I think Lerna is super helpful, even if you're not using npm or pushing up your packages to npm and you're just using it for a private project.